Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today, and also thank the people who are joining us on Facebook. Before I get to your questions, let me give you some examples on the latest updates of our organized retail crime efforts. As you know, 2 weeks ago, we kicked off the Safe Shopping campaign, and we are still seeing charges come out of that. So before I begin discussing those charges, let me preface this by saying that these are just charges. Charges are not evidence, and people are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So one new case we have filed involves the indictment of a man by the name of Juan Ambriz Rincon. This man allegedly traveled from out of state to Maricopa County to commit numerous thefts from home improvement stores. And from Maricopa County, he took approximately $46,000 worth of merchandise. It's alleged that in each of the incidents, he would exit the store without paying for large amounts of merchandise and then would sell or trade that stolen merchandise online. The indictment alleges that these crimes happened from October of last year through October of this year. And it includes 14 counts of organized retail theft, and those are class 4 felonies. There may be additional charges from other jurisdictions. Another case we recently charged is that of Sarah Barker and Sierra Monroe. Those women faced organized retail theft charges after taking, combined between the two of them, approximately $6,600 worth of clothing from discount retailers across the valley. And I bring these cases to your attention. These are certainly not the only two that we're working on, so that we can reinforce the message that people who come here to commit these types of crime will be held accountable. This is not another state where the DA is not charging these cases. This county attorney is charging these cases. We will find you, police will arrest you, and we will prosecute you and hold you accountable. Now, to the retailers out there, I would like to say again, this is not the cost of doing business. These are not people stealing to sustain themselves. These are people who are sustaining to fund other criminal activity. And so your cooperation with law enforcement is vital in our efforts to curb this. If you're a customer and you notice this type of activity while shopping, please report it to the store authorities, but do not engage with the thieves. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions you may have.
I was hoping that we can ask you about Sterling Evans and his case. He's about to be on trial for second-degree murder. His team has been raising concerns of the lack of evidence and how evidence was handled by Tempe's Forensic Services Unit.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we've talked about in press conferences past, many of those cases, including that one, have been handed over to the Mesa Crime Lab to review. We are in constant contact with Mesa to let us know when they have completed results that we can then share with the defense. We have also been in contact with the defense to let them know, not just the defense in that case, but the defense in every case, to let them know what is going on. We've shared with them letters that we have received from Tempe PD about the situation, and we have assured them that as soon as we start getting lists and information, that we will act appropriately about that. And then, as a matter of fact, I personally spoke with the head of all of the indigent defense services a couple of weeks ago and reassured her that we were working diligently on this and we're going to communicate at the earliest possible time.
How do you move forward, though, to trial as early as February when there's so many gaps in a case like this?
Well, if there's gaps, there will likely be a continuance. I mean, it's not uncommon for a case to be going on while evidence is being tested. That's not uncommon at all. But certainly, if there are unanswered questions or if the science is in question, we certainly want to get that shored up before we would proceed to trial on something like
So
that.
besides Sterling Evans, what other cases do you know that are being impacted because of Tempe's?
We have not been given a final list of the cases that may be impacted. So we have been assured that we will get a list of cases where the result is different or would impact the case. And we're going to share that with the defense and act accordingly on our cases.
I have this recent letter that Tempe Assistant Chief of Police sent to your office, Tom Van Dorn. It talks about how they have already reviewed over 400 cases, basically since September, since that's when they first alerted you. Following this review, 20% of the examined cases have been identified for fingerprint reevaluation. Is that concerning? Is that alarming? I mean, we're talking 20% of those 400 cases, and do you worry that there could be more cases out there?
Well, obviously it's important to me what their process was for identifying which cases that they're going to look at, making sure that all of the potential affected cases were identified and looked at. Anytime you have evidence that's now brought into question, yes, that concerns me. Nobody wants to go to proceed on a case when there's evidence that is questionable. And so we're following the steps that we would normally follow, which is to rely on the now crime lab, Mesa Crime Lab, to identify where their issues are, if there are any, and then to act appropriately.
And then my last question, have you been notified of anyone bringing into question any post-conviction reviews because of Tempe's?
I have not, but I can make sure that that's, nobody in my office has, and we can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions about young people and firearms deaths. We've seen a real dramatic number of teenagers killed this year by shooting deaths. And a lot of these cases are not street gang members shooting each other. We have football players, and high school cheerleaders. What can you do, if anything, in your position as the prosecutor to try to address this problem?
Yeah, I share your concern. It was about a month or so ago that I met with the Administrative Office of the Courts concerning this trend. And it was interesting because their preliminary stats, and they pointed out that these were a draft, showed that while crime was below its pre-COVID high, that the gun-involved crimes were higher, significantly higher than pre-COVID rates. And so what we're looking at a number of things that we can do. One is we're looking at how they address whether these individuals should be held in custody pending their adjudication. That's one thing. Second thing, we're looking at our policies on how we're responding to these cases to make sure we're doing everything that we should be doing. And the third thing we're doing is we've approached the legislature to change the law. We've become aware that there is a glitch, for lack of a better term, in the law where we have parents that are calling the police saying, we don't want our child to have a gun, but yet the law allows a child to possess a gun within the house. And so we've asked the legislature to take a look at that and to fix that loophole. Not to take anybody's rights away of lawful gun ownership or responsible gun ownership, but when the parents don't want their child to have a gun in the parent's home, they should be able to address that.
A couple of these cases that we've seen, it appears that parents had a gun in the home. Are there charges that you could file against parents if their kids take a gun from the home and use it to kill somebody else?
You know, that's going to be a very case-specific situation. We have to look at a whole plethora of facts, and we're going to look at each case individually. Some of the things that I would be looking for are, did the parents realize that this child had access to the gun? For example, if it's locked up, that the child could access it, or if it's not locked up. We want to look at, were they concerned that there was an issue, that this child might act out with the gun? So there's a host of things that we would look at. Potentially, yes, we could bring charges against the parents.
And is there any effort underway to just address whether it's a child buying a gun on the street, or a prohibited possessor. I mean, I can get on the phone and make a phone call and buy a gun on the corner, and it's perfectly legal. Is there anything, recourse, that your agency or police agencies have to try to do something about the just sheer amount of guns being sold on the street?
Yeah, I know that we're looking at, I mean, there is legal gun sales, as you pointed out. One of the things that we're seeing, it's not responsible for all the guns, but it's responsible for a number of the guns, is that people are leaving their own personal firearms in their cars, and teenagers usually are breaking into those cars and stealing the gun. And so we're doing educational efforts with people to say, do not leave your gun in your car, take it with you, take it into the house, so that this kind of weapon doesn't find its way into the mainstream of teenagers.
The gun or firearm thefts is the number one cause of death of teenagers between the ages of 15 to 17 in Arizona. We see fentanyl PSAs, and there's a huge effort, rightly so, to tell people about the potential problems with fentanyl and the deadly consequences of using these counterfeit pills. You don't see a lot of PSAs or public officials talking about the dangers of firearms in the home, whether it's the potential for suicide with a child, or potential for child that accidentally shoot somebody or take it and do something else. Is this an area that you think elected officials, law enforcement officials need to do more work to get this message out to the public?
To me as a prosecutor, the best case ever is the case that never happens. And that means if we can educate it away, that's the best way to handle a case. And so if there's a PSA effort or any other educational effort put together where we can talk to people about the dangers of teens with guns, I'm all for it.
And then I wouldn't let this opportunity go by without asking you if there's any update on the Lori Vallow case and her appearance potentially in a courtroom in Arizona.
I spoke with the prosecutor earlier today. Right now, the extradition responsibilities lie with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and so they're driving the bus at this point on that issue.
Mitchell, are you aware of the beating death of Jake Kelly in Northern Phoenix?
Yes, I am.
It's not been labeled a hate crime, but the victim's mother believes that hate was involved. And there was a neo-Nazi skinhead who was involved in the crime as well. And of course, Jake Kelly is an openly gay man. What reassurances can you give both the victim's mother and the public that this will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law?
Well, we are going to take a look at it, and obviously the police are looking into whether there is evidence that this was hate motivated. Merely because somebody falls into a class does not make it hate motivated, doesn't make it not hate motivated. And so we're going to look and see if there's any evidence either existing or to be developed, and then we're going to review the case and handle it appropriately.
You may be aware of the fact that 3 people were arrested on November 10th in relation to this case. One of them is charged with second-degree murder. The other 2 are charged with hindering prosecution. It originally was, or when they were arrested, they were held under hindering prosecution, felony 3. And now they're being, they're bondable, but the 2 that are bondable are being held under felony 5. Or that's the way your office charged them. Can you explain the discrepancy then?
I would have to look at what charges were submitted originally. I know that we charged as you said, hindering class 5. It's not uncommon to make that a bondable offense because it's a probation eligible offense, whereas second degree murder is not. And so maybe that had something to do with it. But rather than speculate, I can check into specifically what happened there and we can get back to you.
Yeah, I would like to know because, as you know, a felony 3 is a more severe punishment for that. And there was another issue. at the arraignment, I think that the victim's rights advocate wasn't there when she should have been. I guess she was late, which is understandable. But the mother was there to ask, wanted to ask that if they do make bond, that they report a pre-trial sentencing.
Pretrial services.
Service, they can have ankle monitoring. And she was able to do that for 2 of them, but she didn't know what the rules were in regards to the first person who, came to the podium, the person who's charged with second-degree murder. So is there something that your office could do to address that? I mean, he's got $1 million bond. It's unlikely that someone would come up with $100,000 in cash. However, there are indications that he does have money and his father has money. So is there something that you could do, your office could do to address that situation? So if he does make bond, he does have an ankle monitor.
We'll certainly take a look at what the judge set as the conditions of release, because oftentimes, as you know, they'll set a bond amount and then they'll say, but if they make the bond, these release conditions apply. We'll have to take a look and see if that was indicated. If not, we'll talk to the mom and we can reapproach the court if it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi there, Rich Crane, 12 News. I've got a few questions from one of our reporters.
Okay.
This is related to gun safety,
Uh-huh.
related to that fatality review report. At least 18 of the firearms used in the 59 firearm child deaths in Arizona last year were owned by a parent or a caregiver. Should they face charges in their deaths?
Well, I'll give this the same answer that I gave before. It depends on the facts of each case, and we're going to look at each specific case individually. It's certainly possible that the parents could be charged, but that's going to rest on the facts of that particular case.
Okay, and then the report says that the children that died by a firearm had access to a gun. Does Arizona need a safe storage law?
The law that we're proposing, I think, would be a good step forward, which is where parents can have more control over what their kids are allowed to possess. So that's what we're advocating for from our office.
And of course, your office is addressing the situation at this standpoint.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one follow-up question to Jake Kelly?
Sure.
Pleading death.
Sure.
The mother of Kelly is concerned that 2 of them have not been charged with more severe charges. And she has expressed to me that she has requested a sit-down meeting with you. Are you aware of that? Do you plan to meet?
Typically, certainly I've met with victims and next of kin. Typically, we ask them to sit down with the prosecutor because that's the individual who has made the decision initially and who has read through all of the police reports. But if it gets to that point, we certainly can do that. And obviously, there's an entire chain of command as well.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everybody.